All right, one panel down, and now we move on to our next one, where we will address programmatic connected TV across Europe. So obviously, I know many of you are interested to hear the developments and what's happening within connected TV. So we will explore this further. So please welcome the moderator for this session, Sarah Botherway, who's in charge of partner development at the Index Exchange. And don't forget, once again, there will be an opportunity to ask questions, and you can do that through the button at the bottom of your Zoom window. And as Sarah's panelists come out of the green room backstage, I will pass over to Sarah to introduce them all. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm going to do a brief introduction to start with, just to kick things off while the rest of the panelists join in. So across the last 6 to 12 months, we've continued to see marketers start to shift their ad spend dollars towards connected TV. And it's our responsibility as a digital advertising industry to create the best viewing experience for consumers, especially according to recent reports where streaming service subscriptions have surpassed cable television for the first time ever. Programmatic holds the promise of being able to deliver on this obligation, but it is up to the media owners, buyers, and ad tech community to innovate together to help television realize the true value of automation. When consumers sit down to tune into TV, they're not thinking about whether they're streaming or watching linear. They're simply there to watch their favorite show. And they expect the same quality viewing experience regardless of how they're accessing the content. So I'm super excited to introduce the panel who is joining me here today. I'm going to hand over to each one of them, and I would like them to introduce themselves and also to briefly define CTV within their role. So to kick things off, I'm going to hand over to Gregor.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Gregor Fellner, and I'm the Business Development Director for Rakuten Advertising in the German-speaking area. Rakuten Advertising is the CTV AVOD expert of Rakuten TV. And for us as a CTV first publisher, as the IAB called us recently, CTV is the smart TV with the big screen. So not so much the connected TVs or connected devices, but more the TV as we know it from the traditional TV. And of course, it should be smart because our OTT app is also smart, and we use the remote control and the Rakuten TV remote control button to interact with this big screen.
Amazing. Thank you, Gregor. Sarah, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. Nice to meet you. I'm Sarah. I'm director for platform business at Springserve, which is owned by Magnite. Springserve is an ad server, really, purpose-built for OTT and CTV environments in particular, but really able to support any video format. And in my role, I look after existing business from a commercial and strategic perspective across international, so anything outside of the US. And as a company, we're focusing on delivering better products to our partners, in particular when it comes to CTV environments, to give them more control, transparency, insights into their inventory, and optimize yield in particular across different devices, environments, across IO and programmatic, and various features as well to improve user experience. And when it comes to defining CTV, for us, CTV is really streaming content on the big screen that is connected via internet-enabled devices, via smart TVs, or via standard TV sets that have connections to the internet via the likes of set-top boxes, streaming sticks, etc. And this is opposed to the linear broadcast signals.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. And last but certainly not least, Nilesh, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. My name is Nilesh Dhawale. I'm the Director of Product for CTV and Supply at the Verve Group. Verve Group is an omni-channel end-to-end platform that fuses supply, demand, and data together to provide an end-to-end solutions for both advertisers and publishers. We are a part of MGI, which is Media and Games Invest, a company that deals with media and games, as the name suggests, operate in more than 30 countries across the globe, but with a particular focus on North America and Europe. Oh, and connected TV. So connected TV for me is a device that can access, it's a device form factor, basically, as opposed to OTT, which is a delivery mechanism. In my role, I cover both, but we do make that distinction in our day-to-day work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. To kick things off, the first question I have for you guys is, what does the programmatic CTV landscape look like in Europe today? And how does this compare to other markets? Nilesh, I'm gonna hand it over to you for your thoughts to kick this panel off.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So when I think about the CTV landscape in comparison to other markets, I think there's 2 or 3 things that come to my mind. There are some things that are common with other markets, so like growth. There's absolutely phenomenal growth. Maybe not as fast as it is in the US or in Europe, but certainly a lot of potential, right? So that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing that comes to mind is the domination by the broadcasters, right? It is very heavily dominated by a lot of broadcaster immaterial of where you look at in Europe. In most of the countries, 70-80% domination, and that leads to certain kind of fish in the market, but it's dictated because the way things are with the broadcaster dominating things. And then the last thing is it's changing in the sense that there is more adoption for AVOD. Again, not as fast as in Europe, but there is certainly a lot of adoption, and it's gaining steam, especially with the likes of Netflix and Disney Plus starting to get into the AVOD world now. So that's the 2 or 3 things that kind of where I see the EU market for CTV and comparisons with other markets.
Thank you so much, Nilesh. Sarah, did you have some things that you would like to add?
Yeah, sure. So in order to answer that question, I wanted to look at the individual participants in this industry to understand more where the scale currently sits when it comes to programmatic CTV. We have the broadcasters, of course. As just mentioned, they are definitely having great stance in their local markets. From a programmatic perspective, however, there is still quite a big focus on running activities via direct IO. Often that is to do with the fact that deals are bundled up with linear inventory, and just generally those partners have a great stance in the market, all the relationships to agencies and advertisers, and are slowly growing that programmatic share more and more. So of course, the UK is definitely more advanced when it comes to programmatic supply from a BVOD perspective, but in other markets, that share is still fairly slow, but it is growing. And then, of course, we have the local streaming services like a Waipu in Germany or Molotov in France that are definitely more relying on programmatic, I would say. They do operate on both sides, IO and programmatic, but programmatic definitely being a big part of their operations. And then, of course, the international providers, so moving away from the local services more into international streaming services like Rakuten, like Bluto, that have launched across several markets and really tailored their content to those local demands. For those services that don't necessarily have individual sales teams in individual markets, it's key to operate in the programmatic space, often having support via multiple SSPs that are driving spend for them. And then I would say lastly, the distributors, so like an LG and Samsung, quite similarly to the fast services, they do have a stance in multiple markets. They have started to grow strong sales teams, but in particular, initially, they were launching their services with programmatic in mind, because that just helps you to grow across multiple markets to get as much demand as possible in order to improve yield in the end. So quite a mix of the individual participants in the market and how they operate when it comes to programmatic and also direct IO. Generally, the scale is growing. There's more inventory being made available programmatically from all of these participants. But yes, we're definitely behind the US, which is a lot more advanced in that space.
Absolutely. And lastly, I'm going to hand over to you, Gregor, for your point of view.
I think everything is said, basically. It's a good summary that Sarah has given. Only one addition: I have local teams in all European markets. However, the maturity of the different markets are different. In Italy and Spain, for instance, there's a lot of business still going on, even with CTV first publishers like us and digital only. And in other markets like UK and also Germany, the programmatic share is growing steadily, mainly because of efficiencies and scale factors. And yeah, I think it will be a trend that is then become eminent in all markets going forward.
Absolutely. I think everyone highlighted some really interesting points, particularly around the fragmentation of the market as well. We see huge fragmentation across Europe, across each one of the countries, with all of the different types of services that consumers can access today, whether that be the broadcasters or the streaming services. And ultimately, I think we're getting there, which is super exciting from a European standpoint. And we're able to learn and lean on some of what the US have discovered for us, which I think is always a positive way to not necessarily be the leaders, but be the fast followers and continue to drive that growth, particularly in the markets such as the UK and Germany. So With this in mind, and with the fact that maybe we're slightly further behind the US in terms of buying CTV ads, I would really like to understand from your perspectives how CTV ads are currently bought and sold, and what is the typical type of targeting that is available programmatically. Sarah, I would love to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, sure. So as we just alluded to, the way as to how programmatic or how CTV ads are currently bought and sold is highly dependent on the individual participant in the market. So when it comes to broadcasters, that is often in a fairly siloed approach, even though I don't want to speak in a very generalistic approach. There's a lot of broadcasters that are opening up their supply to multiple demand sources, but with others, it is a siloed approach, meaning that an agency has to go directly to their partner and use the pipes that are in place and the proprietary way of buying across those supply sources. Then there is others, of course, that are very much open to various demand sources, working with multiple SSPs, multiple DSPs, which allows to form curated marketplaces, for instance, which is something that MEC focuses on quite a bit, whereby you have a buyer brief, you are curating inventory for the buyer within a group deal ID to allow an agency, for instance, to buy across multiple sources of inventory for certain targeting to be applied, and generally for more scale within one media buy to be achieved, which, as we know, in CTV, there is scale and it's growing, but still in a space that is nascent. So there's a lot more to do. But then from a targeting perspective, we see at this point in time, a lot of content-based targeting. So the likes of genre or channel or program, again, to the scale topic. With some supply, there's just not enough scale to really apply a deep targeting opportunity. So whilst the scale is growing, there's going to be more opportunities to deploy first-party data, which we do see is happening, including the likes of ACR data from LG, etc., that really allows buyers to understand the incrementality of CTV as well. And then I just wanted to make one point on more of the sell side. So what we've seen develop is that, similarly to the display space, publishers are now moving away from a sort of waterfall model. Initially, a publisher might launch in the space and might, from a programmatic perspective, work with one SSP to monetize, but then they really see the need and the requirement to work with multiple demand sources. And as we all know it, a unified auction is really the way to go here in order to drive more efficiency, to increase yield, and also give more access to basically all of your inventory to the buy side. So those are the developments that we're seeing.
Amazing. I feel like you've summarized that extremely well. Does anyone else have any other things that they would like to add to Sarah's answer? Awesome. I agree, Sarah, with a lot of the things that you've talked to. The content genre and the content object is super important within the CTV world, and getting more standardization around this and around the information that is being passed is going to help support the CTV industry to continue to grow. And interestingly, the unified auction element will, as you've said, help drive the efficiency for both the buy side and also the media owners as well in maximizing their yield. And that will be a super interesting change within the market to continue to follow over the next year. Talking about developments within the market, over the last 12 months, I would love to understand from you guys, what has been the biggest development you've seen within programmatic CTV over the last 6 to 12 months? And has there been much progress? So to kick this one off, I'm going to pass over to Gregor, and I would love to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks. So I think building upon what Sarah was saying, the capability of having group deal IDs for a certain amount of publishers started to build their own products. So like Finecast or CastX, having their own created marketplace to have reach and scale when they buy CTV is one big trend. So we're seeing this more and more often, that agencies are also building on top of this some targeting solutions, reporting solutions, and the upcoming new format we have here at Rakuten TV, the advanced CTV ads and interactive ads, all driven by, let's say, the combat with the moving QR code during the Super Bowl. I think the QR codes are now becoming more and more prominent in the CTV space. using also the targeting capabilities and the interactive capabilities that we have on CTV. So I think these were the biggest two trends that I saw in Europe in the last 6 to 12 months. And there are already new trends coming up, which are having more and more content signals to have a more granular contextual targeting that we also discussed previously. So that's the next trend.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gregor. Sarah, was there some things that you would like to add?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that generally we've seen a lot more demand for AVOD. Obviously, that has to do with the economic factors, recession, inflation, and all of that. So there's a lot more demand for free services, which has been accelerated by these market factors. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot more quality supply coming into the market. We all know about the plans that Netflix and Disney are pursuing. But apart from those two players, I would also mention other SVOD services that have introduced ad-based tiers or models like Discovery or DAZN. Those two are quite interesting from a buy-side perspective because they are bringing live sports inventory into the space, which makes it accessible to buyers previously not being accessible because that has been locked in these SVOD environments. So that's going to be hugely of interest for the buy side. And then I would just mention that we've seen a lot of fast services coming into the space. Apart from the SVOD services that are introducing AVOD models, there are a lot of content studios out there that have so much content that have previously syndicated that and licensed that to other companies, but are now really deciding to take more control back in-house to create their own fast channels and distribute them out to the likes of LG, Samsung, etc., and monetize them themselves as well. So there's a huge increase in terms of these channels, which brings a lot more inventory into the market as well.
Amazing. I think ultimately the current economic environment is driving a lot of these changes which we're seeing, whether that is the rising interest rates or the other things happening within the governments around Europe, is definitely changing the way consumers are deciding which subscription services they will subscribe to, but also how they access their content as well. So in terms of the change in where the consumers are is a big thing, which I think will ultimately drive the buying behavior across connected TV as well. But I love, Gregor, your points around interactive ads. This is super exciting. I think it's really nice to be able to truly measure the impact using QR codes to ultimately be able to show the ROI without having to go into complex measurement attribution, which is super exciting. I'm sure there's going to be more developments around this in 2023 as this becomes more standard across the marketplace as well. Was there anything else anyone wanted to add to that point about the biggest developments in CTV in the last 12 months? Amazing. Let's keep on moving. In terms of accessing TV, we know that there are sometimes barriers. So I would love to understand what the biggest barriers to enabling programmatic CTV at scale within Europe are. Are these the same challenges we've faced over the last 12 months, or are there new challenges arising which need to be addressed? To kick this off, Nilesh, I would love to get your point of view.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. So in my opinion, experience, I think a lot of challenges are fundamental and they're still the same. The one thing I feel, and I guess they've been talked about quite a bit, so I won't touch on them again. But there's one thing that I feel is slightly different that I felt tipped the scales in the US that I haven't seen so much in Europe yet, which is there was this fast rate of decline in pay TV subscriptions in the US. Like people were sick of paying more and more money. And what that eventually led to is it went hand in hand with the growth of fast, right? Fast channels. And that just added inventory in the market that helped everything in general. This kind of created the flywheel effect, in my opinion. In Europe, in my opinion, you don't see the rates of pay TV subscribers go down as fast. And hence, in my opinion, growth of fast is a little slow. That's a little bit weird thing to say, growth of fast is slow, an oxymoronic thing, but free ad-supported TV is, ad-supported streaming is not growing as fast. And when that happens, I think the two will create a flywheel effect, and it will happen sooner or later, just not there yet. That creates, that helps to make these fast channels grow faster and helps with the scale issue that we currently see across different countries with the language and content preferences that each country has.
I think Oh, sorry. Yes, I think to really fuel this growth of fast channels, we need to tackle the challenge of a common currency of TV and digital. I think we share the same device with linear TV, but we don't share the same currency as of now. But with fast, we have TV-like experience and usage of the audience of this offering, and therefore we would need also a common currency to move more TV budgets into CTV/fast. So I think that's one barrier that we will have to work on. The more fast channels we see and the more eyeballs we will see on OTT services.
Completely
Yeah,
agree.
I would also agree with Gregor. I think targeting and measurement is one of the key topics that everyone is talking about as being the biggest barrier to attract more CTV spend. And to Gregor's point, currently for agencies or buyers, it's not possible to plan, report, optimize across different channels, so TV versus CTV, across different devices, CTV versus mobile, laptop, etc. It's just extremely impossible unless you're looking at the walled gardens, where obviously all the data and measurement is available, but only within those walled gardens and not outside of it. I think on a bright side, we have been seeing companies trying to find solutions. Of course, we need one solution, one kind of single source of truth. And I think Project Origin is one of the most exciting collaborations that have started to happen in that space, as it is an independent body comprised of advertisers, publishers, vendors, to really find that single source of truth and standardization in that matter. So hopefully things will move forward and into a more of a positive direction next year.
I couldn't agree more. I think common currency is super important. And I think also common language as well. The way we talk in programmatic and digital can be full of a lot of acronyms, and those acronyms aren't always the same across linear TV. So bringing everyone together and being on an even playing field, whether that be in currency, whether that be in general terms, I think is going to be very important to enabling the growth and ultimately the education to the linear TV buyers on digital, but also to the digital buyers on linear TV. There is so much history and, I guess, knowledge that TV advertising can bring in and give to the digital and programmatic side of things as well. Although barriers are one thing, I do also want to touch base on what the potential biggest successes have been within CTV Europe over the last year, because we can't always just be focusing on the challenges. We also need to acknowledge and celebrate when there are things which are wins. To kick this one off, Nilesh, I would love to get your perspective.
Sure. I think, in my opinion, one of the biggest success stories is Netflix and Discovery also, but Netflix particularly starting to adopt the advertising model. I think that's going to fuel a lot of growth, a lot of excitement, a lot of followers, and will really cement, if there were any doubts about AVOD model being successful, it will really cement its place in the industry. I think Netflix starts in 2 weeks or so in 12 markets, including the big 5 in Europe. So it'll be interesting to see. I think between Netflix and maybe even Discovery combined, we might see about 20-30% increase in inventory. And that just helps with the scale issues that we see and just helps us grow. So that, I think, even though it hasn't happened yet technically, we still have 2 weeks to go, but writing's on the wall. So that's, in my opinion, one of the biggest.
It's good that they entered this market because it will probably raise all boats, but I wouldn't call it yet a success story, to be honest. I waited and see. We went for Rakuten TV the whole way from TVOD now to AVOD and FAST and SVOD. So we have everything in one platform as a hybrid platform now for 1.5 years at least. It was a long way. So it's not so easy when you look at the audience to do it successfully as we've done. But as you said, it's good to have more of these partners in the space and showing and proving the importance of OTT services to the audiences. Having them also in the AVOD space is a success. But if they are successful as we are, we will see.
Amazing. I think ultimately, I know Rakuten have been around for a while now within the space and have been pioneering, particularly in Europe. So I think it's of value that there is probably a lot to learn from a lot of these streaming services who are making the pivot into AVOD supported models as well. It's not necessarily an easy market. We've heard in the panel earlier, and we'll hear more later on. As a EMEA, as a market, we have the challenges of GDPR and consent, which we have to play with as well, which brings a whole new dimension to the world of connected TV. So with this in mind, we know that the IAB Europe's recent 2022 Attitudes to Programmatic Advertising report, that CTV will be a big focus in 2023. In the report, all stakeholders expected their programmatic investment to increase over the next 12 months. With this in mind, how do you see programmatic CTV evolving in the next 12 months? And how can the industry take a step closer to capitalizing on the opportunity this channel presents? I would love to hear from all of you as a roundup across expectations over the next 12 months. Sarah, would you like to kick this off?
Yeah, sure. So I would like to highlight 3 topics really, and some of them have been mentioned before. So first of all, finding a solution to measurement and targeting, finding that common currency, which seems to be moving forward. There's some positive developments with Project Origin in that regard. So hopefully we'll get there, or closer at least, within the next year. Then the second topic, which you actually mentioned, Sarah, which is the whole topic on education in this fragmented market, really bringing more expertise to the market, bringing more expertise to individual partners, and really helping them to understand the space, helping buyers understand what's the optimal route to inventory in order to drive more spend into that connected TV programmatic space as well. And then the last topic is user experience. I think up until this point, and obviously there's publishers that do it better and publishers that do it worse, but up until this point, I feel that individual CTV publishers have been trying to generate the best success for them in terms of the highest revenues, which is definitely fair enough. But now that we're seeing more and more supply coming into this market and more opportunities for users to choose content, we really need to focus on driving better user experience from an ad break perspective, but also from a content perspective. When it comes to the ad break, a user really wants to have that linear experience where you have a seamless transition from the content to the ad, back to the content. You don't have the same ad in one ad break. You don't have competitive ads. There wouldn't be any sensitive ads that are showing. Do still see issues in that regard in the connected TV space with buffering, with competitive separation that is not happening with ads that are not deduplicated. So I think there needs to be a focus on driving a better experience in that space for sure. And then the second one would be content. Again, as we're seeing more and more supply coming into the market and more choices for users, we're starting to get extremely overwhelmed with regards to what content do we actually want to watch. So I think this one is definitely very much connected to the device manufacturers, which need to find better ways in order for users to discover the right content that's based upon their interests. Because in the end, for the user, it's all TV. It doesn't really matter if it's CTV or linear. They don't understand the difference. They want to find the best content suited to their needs, and I want to have a great experience.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
First, I completely agree with everything Sarah said. We definitely are going to make a lot of headway, and we should, in a lot of these things that Sarah mentioned. If I may add something to it, I think I look forward to adoption of standards, which I think will bring efficiencies in the market, right? Like today, there's a lot of inefficiencies because things aren't standardized. The IB has recently come up with the RTB 2.6, heavily focused on a lot of CTV related things like ad podding, shared user agent usage, and content targeting. I know Sarah mentioned this a few times, and it's very critical. We've had this, but there hasn't been standardization that creates inefficiencies. So the network and channel objects are there now, first class in ORTB, and I'm really looking forward to adoption and hence driving a little bit more efficiencies in the whole chain.
I couldn't agree more. Gregor, I would love your view.
Yeah, speaking about efficiencies, I think, and about targeting, the rise of programmatic guarantee is also something that I see more and more, especially quarters like this quarter. People want to make sure that they're running at the right content at the right time and with the right scale. And they are used also from the TV forward market, they book more and more on the programmatic guarantee deals. So this is also a trend that I am foreseeing. Also the consolidation of the market. So now we are in expansion mode, but I see that we as, for instance, a sales house, which is on the CTV forefront, get more and more requests from the market if we can help them to monetize their AVOD and the fast channels. So I think there will be also an expansion and at the same time a consolidation trend coming in the next couple of months or years.
I couldn't agree more with everyone. And I sometimes when everyone agrees, it's just all a bit too nice. In saying this, like within the world of CTV, it's going to be so important that all of us are working together as part of the digital industry to really pave the way for that innovation. We've mentioned adoption of standards, Nilesh, in terms of OpenRTB 2.6. And as you know, that this is going to be ultimately the lock and key that will help to open up the industry. And Sarah, you mentioned the importance around measurement and targeting, and we are all aware that there is a new measurement standards coming out from the IAB in early 2023, which references specifically CTV, which, as we all know, is starting to build those foundations to allow for the scale. And the continued education within the market is imperative. People need to understand what the standards are for, to then also understand how to implement them and ultimately continue to grow the market as a whole. The rise in PG, not particularly surprising, very, as you said, Gregor, in line with traditional TV buying and ensuring that budgets are locked away towards the Christmas periods and the busy traditional spending periods. That was the last official question of the panel, but we do have some audience questions. So I am just going to get them up and pass them over to the floor. The first question I have is, to what extent can advertisers of age-restricted products, such as gambling, alcohol, etc., avoid CTV ads being served to inappropriate audiences, for example, children? Is this sufficient to satisfy the expectations of the relevant regulatory bodies?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just from my perspective, or from our perspective at Springserve, we offer the capability to our publishers to fully control the ad experiences, so within or across their supply. So if there is kids inventory, then our publishers can decide what ads will run against that. They can apply block lists in terms of IAB categories to not have any gambling ads or alcohol ads on that supply. They can have block lists in terms of actual advertisers. And the way we do it is we actually, as an ad server, scan every single creative that comes into the ad server, which gives us 100% accuracy in terms of defining what is the advertiser and what is the IAB category, amongst other things. From our perspective, from a pure tech perspective, that is very much controllable to a very high degree of accuracy.
Plus, we have also editorial rules, and one is that we use time targeting. The sensitive products, age-restricted products, only run in the evenings until late night, as well as we use the first-party data we get from the studios and the content providers to have age targeting, depending on their classification of content. There are some checks and balances technically, but also editorial, to avoid misplacement.
Yeah. And content rating targeting as well. So you have content rating that you can target against as well.
I think that's a fairly good summary across the board, and fairly similar as well to the approach that linear TV takes, which I think is the importance to show the continuation across both programmatic as well. This question relates to some of the comments we were making at the end around consolidation, but I still think it's important to address, which is, what do you think the future of CTV is? Surely it can't be sustainable for us to have this many players within the market. Would aggregation be an option? And what do you predict on that front?
Yeah, I can kick it off with this one. I do feel like CTV, just like most other forms in advertising, the only change there I see, change is the only constant I've seen. So there is absolutely going to be aggregations, there's absolutely going to be mergers and acquisitions. That's just how our industry works, and I don't see it any different for CTV here as well.
Did anyone else want to add anything more?
I can only repeat myself. I think that's a trend that's at least what we experience here at Rakuten Advertising. People already reach out to us to ask us to help them to monetize their services. So there will be some aggregation, at least at the monetization and front. And of course, some mergers will also arise from that. And
as I've already said, I couldn't agree more. I think ultimately lots of markets see fragmentation and then ultimately consolidation, and that's what helps build the markets as well. There has to be some leaders out there doing some forefront work to be able to lead the industry, and it will ultimately result in consolidation, which will be good for everyone to drive the efficiency and effectiveness across CTV. We've got one last question from the audience, which is, with investment due to increase in CTV, are we likely to see a universal clear-cast type regulator and approval process across all publishers, particularly within the UK, but also in other markets?
I can start answering or trying to answer that one. I'm not sure if we will have a universal approach to that, because in each local market, there's either different bodies, similarly to Bob and Clearcast, that are managing or really defining that process. But then in other markets, such as Germany, there isn't really like an official body. It's up to the broadcasters to really make sure that ads are quality, high of quality, brand safe, etc., before they deliver. So I think, yeah, finding universal solutions is difficult in regards to any topic. When it comes to approval processes, I do believe it will probably remain local or relevant to the individual broadcaster, but that is just my opinion.
Yeah, it makes also sense because to keep it local because of the different local regulations and moral and other things which are different from country to country, thinking of alcohol, for instance. And I think that digital will also have a big influence. So what we saw in digital, we probably will also see in CTV. So I'm not sure if TV will lead the way. Depends on how fast the TV budget is going to CTV, or digital will conquer the TV. Maybe we will have more digital rules in CTV than TV rules.
Fair enough. Nilesh, was there anything that you wanted to add to that question?
No, I think I'm good. I think it's been covered.
Amazing. Well, thank you, everyone. That was a really great discussion. Over the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen the organic growth and scale in programmatic CTV. Although slow, it's still there, which is ultimately due to how quickly the audiences are starting to shift towards streaming. No matter what, now is the time to ensure that we're driving effective yield and efficiency for both the media owners and the buyers. And the next step to boosting this efficiency and realizing the full value of programmatic CTV is standardizing how media owners and ad platforms represent the content and inventory information within the bid request and also reporting. Marketers need to understand where they're buying through programmatic channels and ensure that they're effectively reaching the right audiences. Thank you all for participating in today's discussion, and I'll pass back to Ryan for the rest of the webinar.